It began in a city where shadows stretched long after sunset, and where justice was often tested by the choices of those sworn to uphold it. She was one of them, Officer Sarah Whitman, a 32-year-old white police officer, known for her unflinching dedication. On the force, she carried herself with precision, crisp uniform, sharp instincts, the kind of eyes that noticed details others missed. She wasn't just doing a job, she was living a purpose. Every arrest, every late-night call, every moment spent protecting her city felt like a thread in the fabric of who she was. Yet, off-duty, Sarah knew how to breathe. She wasn't the officer with her hair tied back and a stern look. Off the clock, she let her hair down, literally. She loved jazz lounges, the occasional glass of wine, weekend runs along the river, and quiet nights with books that carried her far from the grim reality of her precinct. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, balanced between justice and joy. But fate doesn't knock politely. Sometimes, it spills right into your lap, or in this case, onto someone else's shirt. It was a Friday night, the kind where neon lights from downtown clubs smeared across wet pavements, and laughter rose above the thump of bass-heavy music. Sarah, dressed casually in jeans and a simple top, had joined a friend for a rare night out. The club was packed, alive with bodies moving to rhythms that felt like freedom. She carried a drink in her hand, weaving through the crowd, when it happened. The accidental bump, the glass tipping, and liquid splashing onto the shirt of a man she had never seen before. He turned sharply, tall, broad-shouldered, with skin the color of deep bronze and eyes that carried a strange calm. His name, though she didn't know it yet, was Collins, a black American man whose presence seemed to command the space without trying. Her breath caught. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, napkins already in hand, fumbling to dab at the stain. Collins looked down at his shirt, then at her. Instead of anger, there was a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Relax," he said, voice steady, cool. "It's just a shirt. I've had worse." The tension dissolved into laughter. It was simple, accidental, ordinary, but it was also the beginning. Sarah offered to buy him a replacement drink. He accepted. They found themselves at the bar, the throb of music softening around them as conversation sparked. What was supposed to be an apology became a connection. He listened intently, his gaze never wandering. She found herself laughing more than usual, caught off guard by how easy it felt. Collins didn't flaunt charm the way most men at clubs did. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. But behind his easy demeanor was a truth Sarah couldn't see. Not yet. Collins wasn't just another man out for a drink. He belonged to something darker. A gang that operated in the underbelly of the city. Men who trafficked in hard drugs, laundering money through the very clubs people thought were safe havens. Collins was part of them. Though unlike the others, he carried himself differently. Calm, controlled, never loud. He wasn't the leader, but he was respected and feared. The irony? On that night, with Sarah beside him, none of that mattered. Over the weeks that followed, their paths intertwined. Coffee dates, late-night walks, dinner in quiet corners of town where the world seemed to pause for just the two of them. Sarah saw Collins as steady, mysterious, but kind. She never questioned why his phone buzzed with cryptic messages, or why he always carried cash instead of cards. Love has a way of softening suspicion, and Sarah, the officer who could read suspects with a glance, chose not to read too deeply into the man who made her laugh, who held her hand like she was fragile glass he refused to let break. But someone else noticed. The gang leader, a man named Victor Kane. Victor was ruthless, a figure carved out of greed and violence. He had built his empire on fear, surrounding himself with men loyal not out of love, but out of necessity. When word reached him that Collins, one of his trusted associates, was seen with a police officer. Alarm bells rang. Victor wasn't a man who gambled with risk. And a relationship with a cop? That was more than risk. It was exposure. He summoned Collins one night. The meeting was cold, the air thick with unspoken threats. "You're playing with fire," Victor said, voice low, dangerous. "That woman, she's a cop. You think I don't know? You think I don't keep tabs?" Collins met his gaze, unflinching. "She doesn't know anything." Victor leaned closer. "Yet, but if she does, if she connects the dots, everything falls. Do you understand what I'm saying?" The unspoken order hung in the air. Eliminate her. End it before it begins. Collins didn't answer. But silence, in Victor's world, was dangerous. The days that followed were a storm within Collins. He had never cared for anyone the way he cared for Sarah. She was light in a world he had chosen to walk in darkness. But to protect her, he would have to defy Victor. And that meant war. The breaking point came one night at his apartment. Sarah had stayed over, curled up on the couch with him. Laughter spilling over as they watched some old film neither was paying attention to. It was peaceful, ordinary. And for a moment, Collins believed maybe the world would leave them alone. But peace doesn't last in the shadows. The door burst open. Shouts. Men storming in. Faces he knew all too well. Members of his own gang. Sarah's instincts flared. She reached for her phone, but one of the men kicked it away. Collins rose, placing himself between her and them. "You made your choice," one snarled. Victor's voice wasn't there, but his order echoed through them. Collins was supposed to kill her. He hadn't. Now, they would do it themselves, and make him pay. The fight was brutal. Furniture overturned. Blows landed. Sarah screamed as fists and guns turned toward Collins. He fought like a man possessed, defending her with every ounce of strength. But then, the shot. It ripped through the chaos, striking Collins. He collapsed, blood soaking his shirt. Sarah's cry pierced the night. The gang fled, leaving him broken on the floor. Sirens wailed minutes later. Her call for backup finally reaching someone. Collins was rushed to the hospital, his life hanging by threads. Sarah never left his side. For days, she sat by his bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, praying for the man she should have never loved, but couldn't let go. Yes, he had been loyal to a world that turned on him. Now, he would burn it down. And Sarah, the cop who risked her career for love, would stand beside him. This was no longer just about survival. It was about justice and revenge. The first thing Collins saw when his eyes opened wasn't the hospital ceiling or the glare of fluorescent lights. It was her, Sarah, slumped in a chair at his bedside, her uniform jacket draped over her like a blanket, exhaustion etched into her face. She had been there for hours, maybe days. A woman who should have been at her precinct, running cases, was instead guarding him as though the sterile hospital room was a battlefield. For a long moment, Collins simply watched her. Weakness spread through him like a shadow, but the sight of her gave him strength. He remembered the shot, the betrayal, the way his own people had turned their guns on him. Rage stirred inside him, quiet, controlled, but burning. Sarah stirred, eyes fluttering open. When she saw his gaze, relief broke across her face, tears threatening to spill. "You're awake," she whispered, as though afraid saying it too loud would undo it. Collins tried to speak, but his throat was dry. The words came out rough. "You stayed." Her laugh was soft, shaky. "Of course I stayed." For days, Collins lay there, recovering inch by inch. And in those days, Sarah's world grew more complicated. She should have reported what happened. The gang, the attack, the shooting. But doing so would mean exposing Collins. And she wasn't ready for that. Love can be a dangerous silence. She filed a vague report instead. Home invasion. Unknown assailants. Victim shot, fled the scene. Her colleagues raised eyebrows, but nobody pressed too hard. Still, whispers began to circulate. Why was Officer Whitman spending so much time at the hospital? Why did she seem distracted, guarded, as though carrying a secret? The city moved on, but danger didn't. Victor Kane, furious at Colin's refusal, furious at his survival, tightened his grip on the gang. He didn't make mistakes twice. To him, Collins was now a liability. Worse, a traitor. And traitors didn't walk away. Late at night, while Sarah dozed in the chair by his bed, Collins replayed it all in his head. Every deal, every order he'd followed, every moment he had turned a blind eye. The gang had given him power, money, respect. But now he saw it clearly. It was chains. Chains that had nearly taken Sarah from him. He wasn't going back. When the doctors finally released him, he wasn't the same man who had walked into that apartment weeks ago. Collins left the hospital weaker in body, but sharper in purpose. He wanted out. He wanted Sarah safe. And more than that, he wanted revenge. But leaving a gang like Victor's wasn't like walking away from a job. It was a death sentence. The first confrontation came sooner than expected. Collins and Sarah returned to his apartment, the one still scarred by the night of the attack. Bloodstains had been scrubbed, furniture replaced, but the memory lingered. Sarah moved through the space with caution, like it might betray them again. That night, as they tried to settle back into something resembling normal, headlights cut across the living room window. A car idled outside too long. Shadows moved. Collins knew immediately. They weren't random visitors. "They're here," he muttered. Sarah's hand went to her phone, but Collins stopped her. "No cops. Not yet. If you call them, it'll be war in the streets. I have to handle this." Before she could argue, the first knock rattled the door. Not polite, demanding. "Collins," a voice barked from outside. "We know you're in there. Victor wants words." Sarah's pulse raced. She was trained for danger, but this wasn't a controlled arrest or a sting. This was personal. This was chaos. Collins squared his shoulders, pain still in his side from the healing wound. He opened the door. 3 men stood there. Fellow gang members, men he had shared drinks and cash with. Their eyes weren't friendly now. They were hunters. "You were told to end it," one sneered, nodding towards Sarah. "Instead, you played hero. Victor says you're finished. Both of you." Collins' jaw tightened. "Tell Victor he doesn't give me orders anymore." The standoff thickened. One of the men reached for his waistband. Sarah's instinct snapped. In a fluid motion, she pulled her service weapon from the small holster she always carried, aiming it steady. "Back away," she ordered, voice sharp, professional. "Hands where I can see them." The men hesitated. A cop with a gun was different than just Collins standing alone. But hesitation wasn't surrender. One of them smirked. "You really think your badge means anything here? Out here, it's Victor's law." But the sight of Sarah's steady aim forced them to retreat. They spat threats as they backed away. "You're both dead. Enjoy your time while it lasts." The car peeled off into the night, leaving silence in their wake. Sarah lowered the gun slowly, hands trembling. Collins moved to her side, steadying her. "You shouldn't have. I'm not letting them take you." She cut in, eyes blazing. "Not after what they did. Not ever." In that moment, they weren't cop and criminal. They were 2 people bound by survival, by a love forged in fire. But survival wouldn't be enough. Collins knew Victor wouldn't stop until one of them was buried. The gang was too big, too dangerous for him alone. And Sarah couldn't fight them without risking her badge. Unless they worked together. In the weeks that followed, a plan began to form. Collins used his knowledge of the gang's operations. The stash houses, the shipments, the dirty money trails. Sarah, torn between her oath to the badge and her loyalty to Collins, fed quiet pieces of intel into her precinct's investigations without ever revealing the source. It was a dangerous dance. Each move drew the gang closer to exposure. Each whisper of information tightening the noose around Victor Kane. But with every step forward, Sarah's risk grew. Her colleagues began to notice. Detectives whispered about her off-duty absences, her strange connections. Internal affairs sniffed around, suspecting something more than just professional interest in the leads she was providing. Then came the ultimatum. One afternoon, Sarah was called into her captain's office. The blinds were drawn, the air heavy. The captain's expression was sharp. "Whitman, we need to talk." He slid a file across the desk. Photos, surveillance shots. Sarah and Collins at the hospital, leaving his apartment, together at restaurants. "You've been seeing this man," the captain said flatly. "Do you know who he is?" Sarah's heart pounded. "He's not what you think." The captain leaned forward. "He's a known associate of Victor Kane, a gang we've been trying to bring down for years. You're a cop, Whitman, and you're lying down with the enemy." She swallowed hard, fighting for composure. "He's not the enemy. Not anymore. He's helping us. Helping us." The captain's laugh was bitter. "Or using you. You're compromised, Whitman. Effective immediately. You're off the case. And if you don't cut ties with him, you're off the force." The words hit like a blow. Her career, her life's work, everything she had built was being held against her love for Collins. When she told him later, Collins looked at her with guilt heavy in his eyes. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me." But Sarah shook her head. "I already made my choice, and I'd make it again." For her, justice had always been black and white, but now she knew. Sometimes justice wore gray. The battle lines were drawn. The gang wanted them dead. The police wanted them apart. And in between, Sarah and Collins stood alone. But together, they would fight. And the war was only beginning. War doesn't always start with explosions. Sometimes it starts in whispers, in decisions made in dimly lit apartments, with two people staring down a future that no longer feels safe. For Collins and Sarah, there was no turning back. The gang had drawn first blood. The police had drawn their line in the sand. And in between, love had left them with no escape but forward. Collins spread out papers on the table one night. Maps of the city, scribbled notes, addresses that only someone on the inside could know. Sarah watched, torn between duty and loyalty, but resolved all the same. "These are Victor's stash houses," Collins explained. His finger traced across the map. "Drugs come in through the docks, funneled to these safe spots before they hit the streets. If we can burn those, his operation bleeds. Money dries. Fear spreads." Sarah nodded slowly. She wasn't just a cop anymore. She was his partner. "And the police can't know it's you feeding this. If they tie it back." "They won't," Collins cut in, "because we're not telling them everything. Not yet." It was a dangerous plan. They weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were dismantling an empire. The first strike came at midnight. Sarah drove. A beat-up sedan, plates swapped. Collins sat beside her, hoodie drawn low, his eyes sharp in the glow of passing streetlights. The docks loomed ahead, cranes like skeletons against the night sky. They slipped into the shadows, moving with precision. Collins knew the guards knew their patterns. He had once been one of them. Now he was the threat they never expected. In silence, they crept to the storage unit. Inside, bricks of powder stacked like currency, the lifeblood of Victor Kane's empire. Collins' hands trembled as he poured the gasoline. This was more than revenge. It was a funeral for the man he used to be. Sarah lit the match. The fire roared to life, flames devouring the stacks. Sirens would come soon, But they were gone before the first responders arrived. By morning, word spread. Victor's men whispered of betrayal, of ghosts in the night tearing their world apart. The Kingpin's fury grew, and with fury came retaliation. 2 days later, Sarah found her car windows smashed, a note pinned to the seat. Cops die too. Colin's apartment was no safer. He woke one night to the hiss of gas. Someone had cut the line. They escaped only minutes before the spark that would have turned the building into rubble. Victor wasn't just sending a message. He was declaring war. But Collins and Sarah didn't flinch. They struck again. And again. Every safe house burned. Every drop location tipped to the police. It was surgical, relentless. Yet each move drew Sarah closer to the edge. At the precinct, suspicion thickened. Her captain called her in again, this time with fury in his voice. Drugs are burning across this city, Whitman. Someone's feeding us intel. And every time, you're connected. Enough games. You're either with us, or you're against us. Sarah's jaw tightened. She thought of Collins, of his hand in hers, of the blood he had shed for her. She thought of the oath she had taken to protect her city. I'm with the truth, she said simply. The captain's face hardened. Then you're finished here. The badge she had worn with pride for a decade was stripped away in a single moment. Her desk cleared. Her career ended. But when she stepped outside the precinct, Collins was waiting. He didn't smile, but his eyes said everything. She had chosen him. Now there was no turning back. The gang's counterattack came swift and merciless. One night, as Collins and Sarah lay low in a motel on the outskirts, headlights swept across the lot. Then gunfire. Bullets riddled the walls, glass shattering. Sarah dove behind the bed, returning fire, her training kicking in. Collins grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back exit. They ran through the night, bullets sparking on pavement behind them. Breath ragged, hearts pounding, they barely escaped with their lives. The message was clear. Victor wouldn't stop until they were buried. But fear only sharpened Collins' resolve. This ends with him, Collins growled, bruises darkening his skin. Not with us running, not with us hiding. With him, dead or in chains. Sarah's voice was steady, cold now. Then we take the fight to him. They knew Victor's routines, his guarded penthouse where deals were struck. They knew his enforcers, men loyal only until fear outweighed greed. Collins had once been one of them, and he knew their cracks. Together, Sarah and Collins began to turn Victor's army against him. Quiet bribes, threats whispered in alleys, evidence planted in the right hands. The empire began to fracture. But Victor Kane was not a man to crumble quietly. He struck where it hurt most. Patricia Whitman, Sarah's younger sister, a schoolteacher, vanished one evening after work. No witnesses, no trace, just a phone call that shattered Sarah's world. Victor's voice oozed through the line. You want her back? Walk away. Leave Collins. Leave the city. Or she dies. Sarah's knees buckled. Collins caught her as the phone slipped from her hands. For the first time since this war began, she broke. Tears streamed, fear like fire in her chest. This is my fault, she whispered. He's using her because of me. Collins' grip tightened. No, this is because of me. And I swear to you, Sarah, we'll get her back. The game had changed. This wasn't just survival or revenge. This was family. They had no choice now. The final showdown was coming. The night Sarah's sister disappeared, the city felt colder. Every streetlight hummed like a warning. Every shadow stretched too long. Sarah sat on the edge of Colin's bed, her hands trembling around the phone call that had shattered everything. Victor Kane had crossed the line. Colin stood at the window, fists clenched, his reflection a storm of rage and guilt. This is what he does. He takes what you love, squeezes until you break. But not this time. Sarah turned to him, eyes red. He'll kill her. She's innocent. She has nothing to do with this. Collins stepped closer, his voice low but unshakable. Then we go get her. No more hiding. No more waiting for them to come to us. We end this tonight. It wasn't just a vow. It was a death sentence. One way or another. They prepared in silence. Sarah loaded her sidearm with the precision of a soldier. Collins strapped a knife to his side, slipped a pistol into his waistband. Their eyes met in the mirror. No fear now, only resolve. Victor had left breadcrumbs, as men like him often did. A whispered tip from a frightened gang member led them to the edge of the city, where an abandoned factory loomed, rusted and forgotten. But inside, it pulsed with danger. The factory doors creaked open, the air thick with dust and menace. Sarah's heart pounded as they moved through the darkness, flashlights cutting narrow beams. Somewhere in the maze of rusted machines and broken glass, Patricia was waiting, or already gone. Then came the voice. "Officer Whitman," Victor drawled, his tone smooth, echoing across the cavernous space. "And my dear Collins, the prodigal son who bit the hand that fed him." From the shadows, Victor emerged, impeccably dressed, as always, a dark suit framing a smile too sharp to be human. Around him, half a dozen armed men, and in the center, bound to a chair, Patricia, her eyes wide with terror, a gag muffling her sobs. Sarah's breath hitched, rage flared. "Let her go," she shouted, gun trained on Victor. Victor chuckled. "Always the hero, aren't you? But heroes die young." He gestured lazily, and two guns swung toward Patricia. "One wrong move, and your sister bleeds." Collins stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't about her. It's about me. You want me? You've got me." Victor tilted his head, amused. "Ah, loyalty. Admirable, but misplaced. You chose love over blood. You chose betrayal over family. That deserves a special kind of punishment." The standoff stretched, seconds heavy as hours. Then chaos. Collins moved first, fast, precise. He dove sideways, pulling Sarah with him as gunfire erupted. Sparks showered from steel beams. Patricia screamed behind her gag. Sarah returned fire, her training sharp and unyielding. Two of Victor's men dropped. Collins lunged at another, blade flashing, the fight brutal and close. The factory became a war zone. Bullets tore through rusted walls, footsteps pounded, shouts echoed. Sarah fought like a woman possessed, every shot fueled by the thought of her sister tied and helpless. Collins moved with lethal grace. Years of violence now turned against the men he once called brothers. But Victor was no fool. He stayed in the shadows, circling like a vulture, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, the trap. A gun cocked behind Sarah. She spun too late. One of Victor's enforcers pressed cold steel to her temple. Collins froze, blood on his hands, eyes locked on hers. Victor stepped into the light, smiling. And there it is. Love cornered. The great Collins, brought to his knees by a woman. He raised his own gun, aiming squarely at Sarah. "Say goodbye." Time fractured. Collins' world narrowed to a single heartbeat. He lunged, a roar tearing from his chest. The shot rang out. Pain exploded, but not in Sarah. Collins staggered, clutching his side, blood soaking through his shirt. He had taken the bullet meant for her. Sarah's screams split the air. She turned, fury flooding her veins, and fired. Victor's enforcer fell. Then she swung to Victor himself. For the first time, his smile faltered. "Drop it," she growled, gun steady despite the tremor in her arms. "It's over." Victor raised his hands slowly, mockery flickering in his eyes. "Do you think killing me changes anything? Men like me don't die. We multiply." But Sarah didn't shoot. She held him at gunpoint, her other hand reaching for Patricia, pulling her free. The sisters clung to each other, tears mixing with sweat and blood. Collins collapsed to his knees, struggling to stay conscious. Sarah rushed to his side, cradling him. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." He managed a faint smile, blood on his lips. "Told you, I'd protect you." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone, maybe one of Victor's own men fleeing, had called it in. Red and blue lights painted the factory walls moments later. Officers stormed in, guns drawn. Victor was taken down, cuffed, his empire collapsing around him. His smile never left, but the power in it was gone. Collins survived barely. Another hospital bed, another long recovery. But this time, Sarah sat beside him not as an officer on borrowed time, but as a woman who had already lost her badge. The department made it official. Fired, terminated. Her refusal to sever ties with Collins had sealed her fate. Yet when she walked out of the precinct for the last time, the weight on her shoulders felt strangely lighter. For the first time, she wasn't torn between duty and heart. She had chosen. Collins, scarred but alive, stood waiting at the bottom of the steps. They said nothing at first. They didn't need to. His hand found hers, and together they walked away. Not as cop and criminal, but as two souls who had fought the world and somehow survived. Justice had been served. Victor Kane was gone, his empire dismantled. But justice rarely comes without scars. Sarah had lost her badge. Collins had lost his past life. And together, they had lost the illusion that love could ever be simple. Yet in that loss, they had found something unshakable. Love that had faced bullets. Love that had defied betrayal. Love that, against all odds, had endured. Months later, on a quiet morning, Sarah sat with Collins in a small cafe on the edge of town. Life was simpler now. No sirens, no gang wars, no precinct politics. Just two people trying to rebuild. But peace is fragile. As they sipped their coffee, a folded note slid across their table. Neither had seen who left it. Collins opened it slowly, his brow furrowing. 5 words, written in sharp ink. "It's never really over." Sarah's eyes met his. Her pulse quickened. Somewhere, in the shadows of the city, a ghost of Victor Kane's empire still lingered. And one question hangs in the air. Did they truly win? Or had the war only just begun?